Hello and welcome to another episode of The Successful Non-Technical Leader. My name is Ben and I will be your host. Today we're going to talk about compensation and in particular compensation diversity. Now, when you're looking to hire a developer, there are basically five ways to commonly hire a developer. One, equity only. Not super common, but it's more common than some. Another, low salary plus equity. Another is just salary. Next is hourly, which is usually higher per hour rate. And then finally, fixed bid. So depending on your project, depending on what your project is and your budget, it may kind of force you into one of these buckets. Now, if you have no budget, then really your only option is equity. And that may sound great on the surface, right? But if you dig into it a little bit, you'll find that there are some pitfalls like wage laws that you can get in trouble with. Another pitfall is speed to market. If you involve a developer who has a full-time job and is only working on your project on the side, and they have a full-time job because they need to pay the bills, well, then your project is most of the time going to get second priority. It's going to take longer and sometimes may not even finish at all. I've seen that many, many times. So that's the second pitfall. And lastly, it drastically lowers the probability you'll ever find someone. You think of the already small supply of developers, narrow that down to developers who are actually decent at what they do, and then narrow that down to the number of those developers who are independently wealthy already and do not need to work to pay the bills. And then narrow that down to independently wealthy developers that actually want to grind for a couple years on your startup idea. So I think you'll find that the no budget equity only compensation is rare, albeit not unheard of, but definitely very rare. Now, if you have a large budget, most of the projects I see with a large budget usually go with equity plus lower salary, or just salary only. And you can get much further by one idea, if you do have a large budget, but one idea to stretch that budget even further is to use your budget to hire full-time at the resource level. So people who are just grinding every day working on your project, and then fill out the other positions on your project with fractional resources. Maybe less critical positions could be fractional, like a fractional CFO or a fractional CTO, while you're using most of your budget on having that fractional CTO start building your resource team from the ground up. Now, if you have in between a no budget and a large budget, which is probably where most of us are, one of the best ways to use that budget is with fractional resources. You can still build a surprisingly good team in this gig economy with almost no budget. I've done it myself. I've seen it done. And the way you do it is you just engage the exact resource you need at any given time. So if you're working a lot on the front end or on the back end of your project, if you need design or if you need leadership, you can hire each one of those positions as a fractional position until you get your minimum viable product, until you grow your revenue and can start hiring either those people full-time or keep them on, but hire in a full-time resource as you grow. So that's one way to use your small budget. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see teams make, particularly funded startups or even bootstrap startups, is they think that they only should do one form of compensation, which is typically salary or maybe lower salary plus equity. I don't know why they seem to exclusively focus on this strategy, or predominantly focus on this strategy, but I think it has something to do with investors. And I've heard this before from teams that I worked with. The investor sees the profit and loss statement and they're like, hey, what's this charge for a high hourly rate? You have to pay a higher hourly rate for a contractor because their work can stop, it can go, it comes in fits and starts, feasts and famines, and so they charge a higher hourly rate. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know why they typically think of that as a negative thing, but it does seem to be common. Now, this is where I get into my last tip for this section, which is what I call compensation diversity. We hear a lot about diversity, right? Particularly in business, but everywhere, where a diverse set of opinions can actually increase a team's performance. I think that is borne out by the data. I think that's pretty well proven that you don't want to have only one type of opinion on a team because then the team gets blindsided. But have you ever considered that compensation may be one of those diverse perspectives that you could leverage on your team? For example, a contractor with a higher hourly rate operates under a different set of incentives than does someone that's cush in a salary position. And mixing those two and having those two kind of, tension. Having some tension between those two perspectives can increase the quality of the code, the longevity, bring in outside perspectives on the code, and really improve the results that your team can get. So definitely consider compensation diversity as you build out your team and as you seek to be successful at your technical projects. As I mentioned earlier, this article and this video is part of a series of content that we're producing related to successful non-technical leaders. And because you stuck around, hopefully this content was useful. And for that, I have a free guide for tech projects for non-technical leaders, which can be downloaded at the link below or at blink.com. You can find it on our blog. As always, if you need any help, if you would like to get a diverse perspective on your team or need help with a project, a technical project, we at Blink would love to jump in and help out and help you be successful. And with that, this is Ben signing out.